CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success.
There's two aspects to it. One is they're unqualified, but the other aspect is so's the maintenance manager. They don't know how to talk to that audience.
So
they're unprepared for the conversation. And so they just, because they're uncomfortable. Do you know any maintenance managers that could truly tell you what their spend next year needs to be?
Well, I think it's rare.
From a ground zero, build a budget, not I inherit, just give me next year plus 20% or give me a little more money. I mean, that could literally go from ground zero and figure out what they need to spend to operate the plant well. It's probably not too many. Now you've got that skill set that's necessary. The other skill set that's necessary is they got to go in front of a room full of people that are numbers people when they're all intuition people. Maintenance people know emphatically that asset 456 is a piece of shit. They know it emphatically because they visit it very often, even if they don't document it in the CMMS. It's too hard to find parts. They're searching on eBay. They're doing 50 things that make that the asset that should get replaced with capital money. But the problem is this. When they show up to the table to request capital money, all they say is this asset's a piece of shit.
Right, and that's not the language of the people in that room.
They bring no ROI information. They bring no data. They bring no life cycle cost analysis. They've done no homework. They're not wrong, but they're using the wrong language to the wrong audience, and it will never work. And so they get frustrated and they go back to their office and they say, well, they just don't listen to me. And so whose fault is that? Is that the leadership fault for not being able to listen in a different language? Or is it the maintenance manager's fault for not being able to speak a different language?
Well, for me, I think they both have some ownership in that, and they should both be taking, like we talk about this stuff online and posts and all this, how self-awareness and self-work is a critical component of being successful in any business entity. And a lot of times people don't ever have to do that. They don't have to become self-aware because everything seems to be fine. They're making the money. There's a few bumps in the road, whatever. Oh, I hurt somebody's feelings. They'll get over it. And when we get to these bigger scenarios, leadership needs, I'm always saying they need to spend a little bit more time with the maintenance team in their environment, not to get dirty or anything like that, but just to kind of understand a little bit better. I'm not trying to make them do something that wouldn't benefit the business. And then maintenance, at least a little bit of the same. If it's just a little bit of improvement on both sides saying, hey, let's leave our, egos at the door. Let's forget about what we know and let's both go on this journey. It would be better. And everybody'd say, oh, Greg, you're not teaching us anything new. No, I'm not. The reason we keep talking about this is nobody does it. And part of that, I think, and I'll defer to you on this, everybody's running around with their hair on fire, which is another thing we've been saying for decades, because that's what it is. Oh, we got to hit that 8 or 12% because we're private equity funded and blah, 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 blah. What about all that? Like, how does it improve?
It improves when you can finally speak their language. Even if you're private equity funded, what they want is money. You got to make more money. You don't make more money by cutting costs. You make it incrementally a small amount more, but you don't make step change money by looking to cut costs. And generally speaking, most folks want to be directed to what to do. That's why leadership positions exist. Those folks are setting direction for everyone else. And when leadership stands in front of a room and says, we need to lower our costs, that resonates with people. Now, if you're in the room and you're a person that wants direction and wants to please their boss, you go back to your desk. Do you find out how to become more profitable or how to cut costs?
Well, based on that directive, you figure out how to cut costs.
Right. So they're being directed wrong because you can be a lot more profitable and spend more money and still be more profitable. But there's only so much cutting you can do before you start impacting the plant in a negative manner. There is absolutely three scenarios. You can spend way too much money to operate reliably. I, and I've seen this in plants. I come from pharma, and I've gone to plants where I said, "Hey, you need planners and schedulers, and you need to do this, and you need to do that." And the plant manager turns around and says to me, "I don't care if I put 12 more electricians to stand next to the line. It makes millions of dollars an hour. What are you doing telling me I have to be more efficient at delivery?" And he's not wrong. They're not wrong, right? So there's the we can spend way too much and be reliable. You then got the other side of the spectrum where we can spend too little and it actually costs us money
Hmm.
because the plant is less profitable. It doesn't produce as many units, which means you're not spreading costs across as many units. And so the plant ultimately its budget is lower, but its profit suffers. And then there's a sweet spot right in between where you've got to try to find the balance between achievement of reliability and the profitability that it results in. No one ever talks about how those converge. All they ever talk about is cut cost. We've got to lower our cost to produce, lower cost of goods sold, lower this, lower that, trim this, trim that. If you go to any website that's, www.insertacompanyname here.com/about us, I challenge you to find one that says we will be the number one company at cutting costs.
Hmm. The- so we won't find that necessarily, but a lot of
But
them are
that's what
actually
they're
playing
but
that
that's what they're
game.
driving towards, right?
Yeah.
So if your About Us webpage says we're going to be profitable, we're going to have high quality, we're going to have great customer service, we're going to have a commitment to the environment, we're going to have a commitment to safety, we're going to have a commitment to our employees. Where in there is we're going to cut costs better than anyone else?
Nowhere.
Right. But somehow it's in everyone's objectives. Everyone.
Do you think that really comes from? Here's another one that's harped on all the time, right? And that's why it pops into my head. Like a lot of CFOs and finance, they maybe it's appropriate, maybe it's not. They get a reputation for all they care about is looking at the balance sheet and finding out where they can make cuts, and all
That's
because
correct.
that's their methodology for gaining profitability. Although, in fairness, I think they also look for those other opportunities where we can leverage existing, say, for example, assets and resources, including our people and our processes, to increase profit. I mean, maybe a company's going to buy a company, and the way they're going to buy that company is by buying the assets, because that's going to hit the balance sheet in a way that really impacts overall EBITDA, and now they've got a higher valuation. That's not a terrible move if you're focused on the
Not.
numbers.
It's not, but what's easier to figure out how to write, direct, act in, and produce a $100 billion revenue movie or be a critic?
Critic.
Okay, well then everybody's a critic because it's
Yeah.
easier. Everybody's trying just finding ways to cut because that's easy. It's much easier to say, throw a dartboard, find a department, do more with less. I did my job.
Yeah, we used to do that when it came to some of our central philosophies in uh, maintenance practices, in, say, for example, building maintenance, janitorial, floor care. How can we do more with less? But we want to make sure we don't lose quality, and we also don't want people to be overworked. And we found ways, but it's not an actual thing.
No, and it doesn't produce nearly the exponential results that doing things effectively does. There is definitely the right cost. And that's what you're searching for. You're not searching for the lowest possible cost. You're searching for the right cost because there's a balance between being profitable and not being profitable. And I often say you don't get to buy the Ferrari and apply the Toyota maintenance strategy and expect it to operate like a Ferrari. It just doesn't happen. It might happen for a week, and if you put it on your resume and jet, then great, you did your thing. But somebody's getting handed a shit bag, and that happens all over the place on a very regular basis, where these poor maintenance managers are getting handed a bag of crap that they have to then deal with because somebody cut costs and then ditched a company, or did it so they can get a promotion, and so they showed that they cut costs at a plant and they got a promotion someplace else. But ultimately, if they're not the right costs and there's no true analysis around, am I at the right cost, um, then they didn't do the company any service.
So if somebody wants to figure something like that out without giving away the secret sauce and how Reliability X makes a difference and an impact when they come in and do a plant turnaround or some other type of consulting or even with the coursework that's available, where does generally speaking, where does that start? Where do they start to look? What can we tell people that would give them some clues?
Well, there's a lot of scenarios to talk about in that situation. We'll talk about some really basic ones. If you want to replace assets that are crap, then you need to start documenting what it's costing the business when that asset is not performing the way it's supposed to be performing, not just the maintenance cost. What's it actually costing? If an air compressor goes down and 5 lines are down for an hour, the cost is not the part that you ordered. And so we have to educate ourselves on understanding what's the true impact to the business. And we have to understand what the goals of the business are and how can we articulate the impact in a direct relationship to the goals. For example, we talked about the, www.insert a company name here.com/about us. Some of those goals are environmental. Some of those goals are safety related. Some of those goals are quality related. And when an asset is not performing, it can impact a lot of those things. If you're an extremely reactive maintenance organization, there are several studies out there that show that you are 4 times more likely to be injured executing a reactive maintenance work order than you are a PM or a proactive maintenance work order, because you feel the pressure to get everything back on. And, sometimes you cut corners or, subconsciously forget steps. And so you can align with the safety organization on trying to be less reactive to minimize safety impacts. You can talk to the quality organization about what the impacts are to variation in not calibrating, check weighers or scales or whatever the case may be, and what that costs the business. You got to boil things down to what motivates the leadership team at your company. And no one can really answer that except for you in the position inside your individual company. What motivates them? Are they all about dollars, or are there other motivations that you can take advantage of? Now, that's just asset downtime. There are lots of other issues from a data perspective that hit the maintenance world. Inside many organizations, they have capital project planning and capital execution, and they require return on investments to be presented to leadership to determine which assets are going to get replaced or what projects are going to move forward for new assets or whatever the case may be. And oftentimes those ROIs are very weak in the analysis that is done for them, and that's because no one actually holds people accountable to the ROI on the backside of it. As a maintenance person, we sit there and we go, oh, that doesn't make any sense. Like, putting in some automatic doors is not going to save our entire electrical budget. Like, that's not going to happen. But these projects move forward. We need to do one of two things. We either need to start holding that entire team accountable to actually producing an ROI, which isn't going to happen because we're the maintenance manager. But we could also take advantage of the process that's been put in front of us and give them unrealistic ROIs that don't make any sense, that no one's going to actually ask you for, so that you can
Mm.
get your project approved. I know that sounds like a complete lack of integrity, but you have to play the game that's in front of you. And I'm not saying completely fudge numbers, but if you've got data that shows you show up to an asset 3 times a week and it costs $100 a pop each time you do that, you can take some guesses at what profit that's impacting? What do you charge per unit coming out of that line? You can take some stabs at what that total cost is, and you'd be really surprised. We've got a client right now, and their mantra is cut costs, cut costs, cut costs, and they don't invest in training, not to the extent that is needed to properly take care of the asset base that they have.
Mhm.
And in the line that we're working with now, we're training that staff, and we're getting them up to speed so that they can properly take care of a line that we have at this point improved by, we'll just say, roughly 10 units a minute. It's a little more than that. Well, 10 units a minute is a few million units a year. It's a few million units a year.
Yeah, it's a
It,
lot.
it's not nothing. So when you have minor stop issues, when you're slowing equipment down because you can't take care of it, um, that has an impact. So if you're not given the PM opportunity to properly take care of the equipment, and in exchange for that, they're saying, well, we have to run more often, but yet they're running at a slower rate, there's a cost to that. And understanding that whole manufacturing process, understanding, and it does not just manufacturing, even in service industries, there's an impact. We've got clients that are university driven clients, right? And so everything is about the aesthetics and making sure there's creature comforts. That doesn't mean you don't have an ROI. When students come on that campus and they take a tour, if they walk by a bunch of dripping ceilings, they're not coming to the campus.
Yeah.
So there's an impact to not having it in tip top shape. And that impact is students go someplace else. And your revenue is based on two things: researchers and students. And so, especially, if you're a research university, so you've got to attract researchers. Well, they don't do that if it's not comfortable and the lab is dark, and things aren't in. It's got a 60-year-old floor, and you can tell. Those things matter. Articulating that is important, and folks should educate themselves on how to articulate to the audience that is in front of them. And it's okay if you are very passionate about it. We'll just say it that way, because they don't generally force back ROIs in almost any industry that I've seen, where they go back and go, well, you told me it was going to save this, so that's coming out of your budget. That happens occasionally, but not dramatically, and certainly not to the rigidity level necessary to actually approve the capital spend that happens. We spend an awful lot of money on projects that don't make a ton of sense.
I'm
and,
curious.
and it's just general.
I'm curious about one thing. We were talking about this concept. You're talking about this concept of better or more accountability, and I've always wondered how. So when we get into these rooms and we're in these organizations and we're moving about, we're kind of playing at least a couple of games at the same time, so to speak, right? Business in itself, is it a game? Well, maybe. And we've got to get done, like you said, what we need to get done. And then when it's time for the accountability, either the accountability is handled incorrectly, like maybe it's, I don't know if I'm making any sense here with this, accessible, like it's excessive, like sometimes it's reactionary, where
No doubt.
somebody's held accountable, but there's no meaning behind this purported accountability we're about to enforce, and somebody's getting walked out. And then the other way around, like part of that game is people want to find ways to be less accountable. So there's less of I don't know, think meritocracy, right? Where
Yeah.
we can always thrive and survive based on what we're accomplishing, almost like what have you done for me lately? And it just has to be real. And if that's all good, everybody's going to be fine. But at some point, somebody's going to come in, parachute in. They don't understand the business, they don't understand the people, they don't understand how we track and not just enforce, but reward by leaving people alone their accomplishments. And then it gets all screwed up again. This is why this keeps happening over and over and over and over. Is that like a major thing that just crushes everybody in maintenance and reliability, that you do all this great stuff, you're going to turn around this plant, and then in a year and a half, they're going to be just struggling with the exact same thing that you fixed.
Yeah, we call it mean time between. We call it MTBF.
Mean time between failures.
Flushes. Mean time between flushes. It's when leadership comes in and they go, "Hey, we're reliable. What do I have all these reliability people for?" Flush, and they just wipe out the entire program that took 7 years to build in a matter of 6 months. And then you end up having to do that all over again. And you're right, it's very cyclical. It's cyclical in places for two, I get, well, I'll say three reasons. One, sometimes you can't affect what that leader's going to do. It doesn't matter how great your program is, flush, done. Doesn't matter. They didn't do this at their previous plant. They have no history of it. They're afraid of it because they don't understand it. Whatever it's an easy line item to cut, so I look like I cut cost at the plant. Whatever it is, flush, done. The second reason it tends to happen is there's from an accountability perspective, we tend to not, we live in glass houses, and sometimes our house isn't so great, and we're trying to toss stones. So we've got folks that are doing all the best they can do in the maintenance manager position. They're handcuffed, A, by budget, B, by the skills trade gap, and C, by the operation not allowing them to properly take care of equipment. But the second they have a 4-hour failure, or they don't have a part that has a 13-week lead time, somebody's got to get fired.
Yeah.
So that's a bad culture, right? But again, the question becomes, well, whose fault is that, right? Whose fault is it that no analysis was done on where the risks are, and those risks haven't been documented and presented back to leadership? You're not giving us the assets. We were told we can't stock parts that have 13-week. Where is the reports that go back to leadership that at least you can point to and say, look, you've been given fair warning on all these things, and you made business decisions. And I get that, but you've got to live with the consequences of your business decisions. If all we do as a maintenance manager is let everything happen around us, then we're not very safe in our position as well as we want to perform it, and regardless of how well we want to perform it. So we've got to make sure that we look. Maintenance does not own the assets. And I talk to this all the time when it comes to backlog management inside of CMMS. It's not your backlog. You do not own the backlog. It's not yours. If you did, you could just go shut anything off you want and do the work. But you don't get to do that. You have to ask permission to go get it done. Therefore, it's not your work. The roofer doesn't come to the house, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, I started ripping the shingles off. I noticed you needed a new roof." You would never put up with that.
Right.
Now they may knock and say, "Hey, look, from the street, I can see that you've got nail pops. I can see your asphalt's falling off everything, and I can see the tar paper underneath. Like, you might want to consider getting that roof done." That's called conveyance of risk. And maintenance owns conveyance of risk. If operations wants to leave a work order in the system for 5 years, I could care less. I am dead against time windows of when you have to get a work order done based on its age.
Mm.
Age doesn't matter. If there's always something else that's more important, then this work order just keeps going down. I don't care how long that is. I don't care how long it sits there. Don't get me wrong. You have to go through backlog management and say, hey, these things are 5 years old. Are we purging them, or what are we doing here? But at the same time, if operations says, well, I don't want to forget it, but it's not really important, fine, leave it in a backlog. So because we own conveyance of risk, that's our function. That's our job. We inspect things, put work orders in, and we should be presenting a backlog and options and say to operations, which one of these, here's my opinion of what's important. What do you want me to get done next week? So that you can actually get the time to get that work done.
And
And
is that essentially based in the concept of criticality?
so it's prioritization of work. Yeah, it's criticality of the work order, not necessarily the asset, because you can do non-critical work to a critical asset. Um, So for me, it's all about prioritization of when they want the when I teach the scheduling concepts from a CMMS perspective and from a work management perspective, what I teach is that scheduling is all about taking advantage of the time that you do get an assets, a window of opportunity. You now have a backlog, you're presenting what you think are the risks. It's up to operations to say, I want this work order, and this work order done next week. And if this is on line one, then you should be looking at a backlog and go, okay, I got a 3 hour window on line one to get this one work order done. What else can we get done at line one between noon and 3 on Wednesday? And all hands on deck. Get as much of that backlog purged out as you possibly can in the window of time that you've been given. That means some of those work orders are old, some of those work orders are new. One might be a PM that you're bringing up by a week. It could be a lot of different scenarios that you're taking advantage of the window of opportunity. But it's not based on the age of the work order. And I see far too many companies that have this age of work order expectation. UPS does not deliver packages by the timestamp on the label. If they did, they would need millions of drivers.
Interesting. When you talk about this, I'm thinking back, over my years in CMMS and how I think a lot of us or them, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Uh, we tout that, when it's product pitch moment. Oh, well, you can see your backlog and you can see all the work orders that are overdue. When in fact, none of that necessarily matters because um, it sounds great. It sounds like doom and gloom, but is it very useful? Mm, sounds like it might not be very useful when instead what you really should be doing is having a best practice of monitoring that backlog based on that style of backlog. If it's a full kitting backlog, that's different. But
Yep.
if it's a pure backlog of overdue work orders, we'd be better served if that window creates itself and we become opportunistic. And the only way you can do that is if somebody's monitoring it. So the question I wanted to ask you is I'm just wondering, is it hogwash that a CMMS platform of any type has the ability to guide you and predict on that? And it sounds like it can't really do it because it can't know what it doesn't know. You don't know what's going to happen or when.
If and there are some systems that do this, so I don't want to project that there are none.
Okay.
There are some third-party scheduling tools that can do this well. But the ones that do it well do it like this. I've got a schedule for my electricians next week. And I know that operations wants work order 1, 2, 3, work order 8, 9, 10, and work order ABC on the schedule next week. Now the system has 3 work orders populated on the schedule. I put the PMs that are due next week on the schedule. And now I've got a list of criteria to help fill in the block, fill in the availability that's left. It should function like realtor.com. If you're searching for a house, Greg, you go, well, what's important to me? Is it lot size or is it the number of bathrooms or is it, and you start putting criteria in and you get search results for best matching.
Hmm.
Yeah, the scheduling tool should work just like that. So now I've got 10 work orders in the system, some PMs and some stuff that operations wants. It should be saying, A, is it the same craft or skill set or trade? B, is it in the same area and on the same asset? Am
Yeah.
I using the same tools, same qualifications? What are all what are the prioritization of criteria that makes something a perfect match? And then you just start pulling in all the work regardless of its age. That's a perfect match. Because if I can send that electrician to line 1 for 6 hours because I got the 3 hour job that's got to get done. I'm going to get some other work orders there done with other electricians, but they're all in the same area. They're all using the same similar tools. They can, they can go to the storeroom and get all the parts for 5 work orders instead of one. All of that creates efficiency. And And that's the job of the scheduling function inside of CMMS. Instead, we think the scheduler is a dispatcher. And that's, based on the supervisor getting a call at 12 p.m. and telling somebody they got to delay their lunch and run over somewhere else. Like,
Right.
that's not what scheduling is. And there are a few systems that can function that well, and a couple of bolt-ons that do that extremely well. Um, but generally speaking, the process doesn't exist as well as, the few tools that can do that. Most systems are incapable of doing it to a degree that I would consider useful.
And those systems, in fairness, are likely useful in other environments that might not be leveraging this approach to maintenance, reliability, availability, because as much as we talk about that on CMMS radio, I know you guys are all about that. You also would be one that says there are environments that shouldn't necessarily be leveraging the comprehensive
Oh, tons of
approaches.
them,
Yeah, like
tons of them.
where
Yeah,
what
yeah.
this idea of run to failure being an actual maintenance strategy, a lot of people tout it as if you're running to failure, it's a big problem. Can you color in some context on that, like an example of where run to failure not only makes sense, but you would be making a mistake to change that?
We'll just say any manufacturing line that has ridiculously available capacity because you don't sell nearly the number of units that you could possibly produce.
All right. Straightforward enough.
Like, let's say, you've got a product that's still relevant to the industry, but it's kind of outdated and it's on its last leg, but you still have sales, and you're focused on many other lines. Why are you spending any amount of effort on a line that's not a moneymaker for you, right? That you keep as a convenience for clients that want it, or customers that have a demand for that product. Maybe it's a line you run once a week for 4 hours, because I've seen plants that have lines like that. Why would you have a robust, stringent maintenance strategy and worst of all, why would you have a time based one when you only run it, every once in a while? But
Yeah.
I see that too. So certainly run the failure is a viable strategy for sure. And just to expand on that, we're not, as a company, even though we write the book Maintenance and Reliability Best Practices, we don't believe that is a one size fits all and that everyone should be adopting all best practices in no way, shape, or form. Consider that more, the buffet table of all the things you could do. And if you're going to do them, here's how you do them well. Um, but not necessarily the end all be all. You need to be doing all these things.
Is it is so it's fair to say that, because I think about this constantly when it comes to maintenance and reliability and how there are things within this overall scheme, so to speak, schema, or these ideas, concepts, and best practices that a little of this and a little of that could be incorporated into what your own process and approach is to running your maybe facilities operation, or maybe it is a production environment and there's a couple of things that make sense. I mean, sometimes what I'm saying, George, is sometimes it's okay to mix and match if it gets you the output, the outcome that you want. Yeah.
I would say any step you take that makes tomorrow better than today is the right step,
And it's that
because
simple.
far too many of us either hesitate to take a step because we're not willing to put our neck out, or don't know what step to take, and we wait to try to decide to make a perfect step, and that delays progress. So I'm a big proponent of, I don't really care what you do. If you make tomorrow better than today, you did a good thing. And I'm also a proponent of educate yourself as much as you possibly can so you do take the right steps. But in lieu of that, just take a step. Just make some, what if you're not sure what the problems are, go ask your operators, go ask your maintainers. They know what all the problems are. Go solve one of them. It just you don't need to revamp process and install new software and do 85,000 other things if right now everyone's complaining about stuff. And if you go talk to those folks and just make their life easier by solving one of their problems, you'll be more reliable as a plant. So even if you're struggling to get the senior leadership buy-in to do whole efforts of PM optimization or FMEAs or get a new solution, like whatever those big large things are, if you're incapable of getting there just now, start documenting making one problem go away and what the business gets back in terms of dollars. And you start incrementally doing that. And then you can go back to leadership and say, look, we've solved 10 problems in the last 10 months, and it's equated to about $200,000 in return value. What do you think we could do if we had a better system? If we had standardized processes? If we were able to just pick off low hanging fruit to that number, what do you think we'd be able to do with actual data? So, even if you find yourself handcuffed, even if you're in a small organization, you can just go ask what the issues are and make those problems go away.
And I want to tie this back a little bit to the CMMS, whatever CMMS or CMMS type system is in place within these organizations, big, small, or in the middle. Is it fair to say that regardless of what you have, even if it's not that easy to use, that too often organizations think they need to just rip and replace because they've skipped that step of assessing how can I make this do something better than what it was doing yesterday? I'm always wrestling with that one as well.
Yeah, I'll say you as politely as possible. It's kind of an unfair question. I without being able, yes, they should try to take advantage of whatever's right in front of them. But that being said, maybe they are ready for something bigger, and I don't know the end. Maybe they have something that's way too much, and they
Ah,
need to scale down. I don't know what the right answer is without being able to assess where an organization is and what the solution is that they've chosen. I will say that given the options of we utilize 90% of the system and it's the perfect size for us, and all the other options that exist, 99.9999999% of the people are probably in the other bucket. They're not in the we did it right, it's perfect, we're getting all the data we're looking for. They're not in that bucket, right? They're in. So everybody should feel like to some degree there's a camaraderie of they either don't like the system, it's not being utilized, they weren't trained right, IT cut the project short, there's 50,000 other things that could have gone better. And yes, they could figure out how to rectify and improve some of those things without necessarily shopping around for a new system. So the short answer is yes, that everybody can pretty much make what they have now better.
well, I got a follow up question that's a little more substantive. What about the providers out there in the world and how rare it is that they would tell somebody, no, you don't need to make a change?
If they are not offering the solution, they might say that. So we're not a company that does. We are not a reseller of software,
Right.
and so we would certainly come in and give them an honest opinion of, do you need something else or not? Uh, if they're trying to sell the product, I don't know that you can fault them for going, "Oh, that thing's a piece of crap. You need the shiny thing over here," right? Like, I mean, it's business. That's what they're there to do. And if they weren't doing that, they'd probably not be hired very long with the company that they work for. Uh, I think that the opportunity for companies that offer integration services that implement these solutions is to have a higher educated staff that can offer better reasoning, we'll say reasoning, why they're telling them they need to utilize best practices and setting up records. They'll tell them you need to have priorities, you need to have failure codes. They'll tell them all that. But do they truly understand all the whys and how it makes the system better and what it will give back to the customer if they put the legwork in to set it up right? And are they willing to tell the customer no when the customer makes stupid decisions and says, yeah, but 85 years ago when I was doing this in FileMaker Pro, this is how I did it. So I want you to do it the same way. And are they willing to say, no, we're not doing that? And I think that's where, can you fault those companies for saying, sure, we'll do that?
Now,
Yes, yes, in my opinion, you can, because they're doing a complete disservice to their clients. Um,
now
but
that
they
now
also
that's
know once they are implemented, it's hard for a client to just swap it back out. So they know that, and so they know they've got a 5-year cycle once they've got the implementation done. So it's you know I don't know. I'm not calling them out on their integrity. I'm just saying it's a disservice to the client if you give them crappy advice and allow them to butcher your system just because they said they can and are willing to pay for it.
now that's kind of the stuff I was talking about where um I think I come off when it comes to the world of CMMS and all the different platforms where sometimes I want to be a paladin and you got to be doing the right things out there, and maybe that's an integrity thing,
You're in a
maybe it's just
position to be
righteousness.
exactly that, Greg.
It-
Like you're literally the CMMS guy, right? You're in an absolute position, and you interview folks, hopefully, that can help you within that position. Now, I get that, maybe from a business, you got to walk a fine line because you might want, one of those companies to sponsor an episode here and there. But if you're in a position to ask challenging questions to folks like me, or even folks that are integrator companies, and if they feel uncomfortable with an honest question, that's on them, in my opinion. Like, go
yeah,
ahead and ask tough questions. You know what I mean? If I can't answer them, then I shouldn't have agreed to be on the show.
and at the same time, in either case, whether you can, can't, or won't, it helps everybody.
Yeah.
And too often, I try to be mindful of the questions that I ask, but at the same time I want to ask the questions that are popping into my head, because now I'm not selling a particular solution, so I can actually open up and be a hell of a lot more transparent. And I like to kind of expect that because it'll help somebody and it'll help the industry, because I want to help all sides,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
It's
I'm all for that, and would not be opposed to, somebody asking me really tough questions. It's a matter of serving your audience, right? Like you're not doing this for me. You're not interviewing me for me. You're
right.
interviewing me for your audience base. Um, you know,
Because people get this opportunity to learn something. It doesn't mean they don't get to learn who operates in a certain way that they may like. I love hearing stories about that. I hear about it all the time. Oh man, so and so was on your podcast, and then we thought it'd be cool to talk to them, and they helped us with this or that, or they told us to talk to this person. That's a real thing, and there's
yeah,
plenty of
no
people.
doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the broader reason you're doing this is hey Greg, loved your episode. I never thought of we had a scheduling conversation 5 minutes ago. I never thought of it like that. Where can I find more information, or whatever
yeah.
the question they may have is. But yeah, I think you'd be serve a good service to your audience to ask to have the folks that run those companies and the integration companies on, and ask them very specific questions. What do you do when a client's giving you a requirement is going to just crush the system and cost them 5 times more than it needs to, because the functionality exists, they just don't like how it achieves it.
Right, right.
Eh,
That's I I'll do that. I can pretty much guarantee it. So that's a good one. I want to make sure. So today, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you've got something coming up. I don't have it in front of me right now. I can't remember the dates. I believe might have been October or November. I wanted to ask about the courses that are coming up at UW.
yeah,
Could you tell
yeah,
me a little
so
bit about that, just for everyone? Because I want to make sure, because they're stacked. You could take that week or so. It's a little bit more than a week, I think,
yeah.
and you could get these courses. And one of them is a CMMS utilization course.
Yeah, so I will be at the University of Wisconsin. I, I hope I get the dates right. October 7th through the 11th. Right, 7th, or no, 7th through the 10th, 7th and 8th. Oh, you're
I'll
putting me
put
on
it
the
up.
spot. 7th and 8th is the course on strategy development. It's a course that talks very specifically about how do you assess your current program totally, soup to nuts. How do you develop a strategy? All everything asset management. The second course is CMMS setup and utilization, which is a really fun course to teach. It's system agnostic, so it does not matter what system you're currently using or if you have no system. The course is broken into 2 days, where in the first day, we talk about core record information, things like assets and locations and PMs and job plan steps and all kinds of, calibration, all different functionality that can exist from a static information perspective. And then we also talk about all of the transactional information, issuing a part, returning a part, logging a meter reading, executing a work order, all the things that are transactional inside a system. So we break it up like that, and we talk about the common functionality. We also talk about the different ways that similar functionality is achieved in a variety of systems. Here's what I mean by that. Some systems have actual location records, some systems do not. Some systems have specifications. So I can say a motor has this horsepower and this frame size. Others require you to create what are called asset templates and then basically add fields to it. And if you don't know what that record, what an asset template does, you just won't use it and you'll never have that specification information. So we go through how different systems achieve similar functionality. On day 2, we talk about the entire implementation project of a CMMS, soup to nuts, from vendor identification, from RFP to user requirements, to evaluating potential vendors, to scoring models for them, to vendor selection, to finalizing your URS, your user requirement specification, for then creating a contract with that vendor to achieve the URS, not implement your software, but achieve the URS. Um, and then all the way through to things like user acceptance testing and validation, everything that deals with how do you communicate to IT, how do you write good requirements, everything soup to nuts on the project side is taken care of, including all the best practices and how to set those records up, and training, all the critical aspects of training and post go live support, all that's covered. So it's actually a really fun course to teach because it covers so many aspects, and there's not a screenshot of an individual system in the entire deck. It is very agnostic. It's very interactive. You learn about databases and how relationships work and all kinds of stuff. So um, it's a fun course to teach. I really hope a lot of people go to it. And then I think the week after that, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, teaches a lubrication fundamentals course at UW the week following that. So we got that in early October. Um, I think that's right. It might be the week of the 21st that I'm at UW. I'm not even sure.
I'll
Um,
put it up.
it's so bad. October is a month for me. I'll also be in Puerto Rico. I have a couple of presentations at the conference in Puerto Rico. That's the end. That's the 28th and 29th and 30th, I think, or 29th and 30th. You'll have to put up some pop-ups
Yeah,
because
I'll put
you
it
and
in there.
I kind of ad hoc jumped on this. So yeah, so October is going to be pretty, and then we've got the SMRP conference, of course. So we've got the SMRP conference in October as well, and then in November I'll be back up in Wisconsin for the SMRP chapter meeting.
Mm,
I'll be doing a presentation for the SMRP chapter meeting up there.
very cool. Very cool. And um, you know, we try to stay agnostic, but there's one thing I want to kind of shout out here for everyone. And so I'm an upkeep ambassador, and for anyone that doesn't know it, George Williams is as well. And a lot of people ask me, what's that all about? Are you out there doing sales or this. And no, it's not like that. It's really because we just want to help people that are utilizing a system. If they're stuck anywhere, they're not sure about a concept, maybe they want to incorporate something that is, maintenance and reliability best practices related. Uh, George is also available for that. In fact, his whole team. So I just wanted to shout that out a little bit because that actually is there to help people, not to sell stuff.
What I
No,
love about Upkeep and Ryan Chan and what the work that Brian Bieshke is doing, whenever they've approached us to ask us about being part of some of their community events, whether it was the maintenance community or the Upkeep Ambassador program, I always told them, look, we have to service our customers, so we refuse to accept any money from you. We're not, there's nothing to promote on our end. Like, we've given them training classes to give away and books to give away and all kinds of stuff, and not once have they said, that's a problem for us. They've never said, if you go in front of a client, you've got to mention Upkeep. Like they've allowed us to contribute to the community that they're expanding in ways that do not require us to necessarily have a commitment other than to the community. And
right.
that's really important for us as a business. We refuse to be part of any community that either expects us to pay to be a part of that community or is paying us to deliver value to that community. So I there's a reason we're an Upkeep ambassador, and it's because they're perfectly fine with whatever we're going to talk about, whatever we're going to say, whether it's promoting them or not, because it's in the benefit of educating people that may eventually be a user of their system. And I love that. That's fantastic.
And I would just add to that it is hyper focused on those that already use the system, that need some expert guidance, and that's really all about. I get people that ask me about it all the time. It's the reason I wanted to bring it up. I try to stay agnostic across the board, but at the same time, I've got people that I consider to be my people that get it. They help me to eventually in some way get it, and we're all here trying to help and make great things. Joe was telling me something when we were talking about it. I think it was Joe. It had to be Joe. It was like our job in the world of maintenance and reliability when you're in these positions is to try to work yourself out of a job, meaning
Yep.
create the availability, the safety, the different things that go along with it. That's the pinnacle, which is pretty hard to do, but it's the strive. And that's what it's really all about, because then everybody wins. And everybody knows, I say it all the time. People say it about me sometimes. That's so flattering to me. I'm chasing the elusive win-win. It's not just bullshit. It's the way everything could work,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we're all doing awesome stuff and everybody's thriving and the bills are getting paid and all, whatever you want to put in there, folks. Man, George, I always love an opportunity to talk to you, especially when we can hit record, man. This
And
is
just
long
go.
overdue, and we could do another one soon. So everybody, I'll put some stuff up in the episode. I'm going to link out some stuff. Of course, as usual, you're going to see a nice little discount you can grab if you want to get the self-paced course for maintenance and reliability best practices, which I'm a big fan of. And I'll get that up there. And George, thanks again for being on CMMS Radio.
Awesome, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Always. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.